Hi, I'm Rick, and this is Burn After Reading. If you're into podcasts more than YouTube videos, then I got some news for you. Burn After Reading is in the podcast universe. You can listen on your favorite podcasting app like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Podbean, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Radio Public, and many more. Keep in mind that unlike other true crime podcasters, I don't monetize my content. I am content with the money I make with my day job. I just want to cast a wider net and bring more awareness on the cases I think you should know about. So please check it out, like, and subscribe. With that said, let's get on with it. Cue intro.
I've got a lot to say, can't hold it in this time. Got no filter, I got no filter. 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 No filter, I got no
Before we get started, I'd like to make a correction. In episode 2, I said there was a discussion between Al Smith's ex-wife Linda and her Christian friend Janet, and that if Janet ever found out Linda lied to her, she'd kick her out of the house. While there was a conversation that took place with that statement, it wasn't with Janet. I misunderstood, and I want to set the record straight. I'm not above correction. I'm human and we all make mistakes, yet at the same time, I feel like that's a lazy argument to make, so I just want to own up to it and apologize and be as accurate as possible moving forward. Speaking of, if there is anyone related to the case and they catch anything that maybe I got wrong, please reach out to me. Be it Beverly's family, friends, or someone in law enforcement. I'll bring up any corrections at the start of the next episode, and I won't mention any names either unless given permission. However, this does not extend to anyone from the Amazon Prime docuseries or any of the journalists, authors, or poets who wrote about Beverly's case. You already had your say, and you can get fucked. So in this episode, I'm going to continue to borrow from Jeff Mitchell's book, but I'm also going to add quite a few things not discussed in it. Things, if you've ever watched the Amazon Prime docuseries or listened to some other podcaster, never went into. Prudent things you should know. Alan Smith, the man once known as the person who rushed to Beverly's aid, was now arrested for her murder. The revelation came as a shock to many. Coburg neighbors had differing opinions on Al. One said he was nice, quiet, pleasant, nothing out of the ordinary. However, another neighbor had a different take. They thought right from the beginning there was something strange about him. They said Al offered to help shovel their snow, but soon after would come with his hands out, expecting money. He also offered to do yard work, but they rejected his offer. In Oshawa this week, Barbara, Beverly's twin, expressed her relief that a suspect was arrested. For her, it was a bittersweet moment. She was celebrating, but also could never forget her loss. She said she needed a name, to know who to hate and eventually forgive, but she wasn't ready for the forgiveness part quite yet. She also praised Durham police for their efforts. Now let me stop there for a moment. If you ever watch the Amazon Prime docuseries, they only play the part where she said she needed a name to hate, but they cut the last part, the part about forgiveness. Editing is a clever thing. A few days later, there was a news conference. Barbara expressed her shock to know Alan was the suspect in her sister's murder. It was a terrible blow to her because he made himself out to be such a hero. She again expressed her feelings of both hate and forgiveness for Beverly's murder. Rebecca, Beverly's daughter, stated she felt Al's arrest was vindication and exonerated her father, Doug. Despite him being cleared as a suspect, whispers still persisted for years, pointing the finger at him. A memory a child growing up should never have to endure. A memory that can never be taken away. As for Doug Smith, when the police called the family to come down to the station, they informed them about the arrest. Everyone was expecting law enforcement to say they had arrested Doug Daigle, but when they mentioned Alan Smith's name, Doug started to make noises that didn't sound human. His shock and his anger belted out in a roar as he shouted, "What? What? I took Becky there! I took Becky there!" You see, after Beverly's murder, Doug felt obligated to bring Rebecca over to see Al and Linda and have tea because they helped. So now knowing the person who he thought helped was now arrested for his wife's murder clearly put him into a frenzy. I mean, wouldn't you, the listener, feel the same? Sometime a little before 10 p.m., Detective Lynch came into the interrogation room where Linda was placed in the downtown Oshawa police station. He asked her if she knew why she was under arrest, and she said yes, because of obstruction. Lynch made sure Linda knew about her rights before she proceeded in answering the police's questions. Lynch was blunt with Linda. He told her that they didn't believe she was fully forthcoming in her accounts and that she wasn't cooperating. He informed her of Al's arrest. He told her they didn't buy that she heard a gunshot at Beverly's house the night of the murder. Lynch and Linda went back and forth until about after 1 a.m., and Detective Rick McNabb took over for Lynch. McNabb informed Linda that they had something in common. They were both Christians, but that her previous statements to police were offensive to him. He accused her of dishonesty and covering up for Al. He also mentioned the failed polygraph test and going on tangents to withhold info. She told McNabb that the duty counsel told her that she shouldn't, but McNabb countered back that it's fine, but that he nor her work for duty counsel. He went on to say that her memory block was nonsense and there's no reason for her to cover up for Al. He was on welfare at age 21 and an embarrassment to his friends. I mean, keep in mind, this is the same guy who took Linda to McDonald's after their wedding. How romantic. McNabb asked Linda if they ever bought pot from Doug and if Bev, and she responded, well, everyone got pot from everyone. McNabb changed the subject and said he believed Linda heard the gunshot because it was close by, but Linda retracted her statement about hearing a gunshot across the street. She said what she told Detective Lynch wasn't true. McNabb had her go back to the beginning to where they came home that night. Linda said Al went out to get some pot for Dave Maunder and that he was gone for maybe about 40 minutes. McNabb then asked, then what happened? But Linda said she didn't know, she wasn't there. McNabb called bullshit. He said she did know because if she told the truth, she wouldn't have failed her polygraph. 2:20 a.m. rolled around and McNabb decided to take a more gentle approach. He told her, look, you're here, God's here, and the truth is here. He asked her, did you see Al with a gun at any time? Linda sat silent. About a minute later, McNabb broke the pause, stating he needed an answer. What he needed was the truth. McNabb was met with more silence until Linda very softly said she wanted to say yes. McNabb asked, you want to say it because it's the truth? Again, he was met with more silence. McNabb was forced to break the silence yet again. All I need is yes or no, Linda. You were there, I wasn't. So if you noticed a pattern, more silence from Linda until she finally broke it by asking McNabb, are you going to believe me if I tell you? McNabb responded that he had to accept whatever decision she made. Now let me tell you, if you are a fan of silence, this part is for you because Linda once again sat silent, not uttering a single word. McNabb paged through some documents inside of a folder. He asked Linda if she was falling asleep on him. She said no. But as far as the answer McNabb needed, Linda continued her silence. But finally, Linda answered the question. Yes, she did see Al with a gun. McNabb asked when she saw it, and she said that evening, through the window by a telephone, or by the telephone. She said she watched Al go up to his Humane Society van, open the door, and put a rifle under the seat. He closed the door of the van. McNabb had Linda go over her new story a couple of times and then asked her why he should believe her story. Linda cried and said because that's the truth. As the interrogation went on, she admitted she knew about the gun all along, but now she just wanted to bring peace to Beverly's family. McNabb asked, why now? Why was she confessing to everything now? Linda said he met her head on as a believer, that she prayed and surrendered to the Lord. He made her confront her faith, and he didn't trick her. Dawn approached, and Linda's confession bolstered law enforcement's case against Al. On April 16th, a month after Al's arrest, Justice Mitchell Furist began hearing submissions. Crown Attorney John Scott outlined the case against Al, focusing on the versions of events Linda had provided police. Dave Maunder had called looking for pot, and then Al had gone to Doug and Beverly's house. He returned looking scared, and Linda had seen him stashing a gun in his van. Linda would testify Al had said he'd hurt Beverly, but that it was an accident. Scott also told the judge he had evidence Al had told his daughter from Coburg that on the night of the murder he had gone to the Smith's house to get pot from Maunder. Al's defense lawyer, Tom Bolka, presented as sureties 3 of Al's children, 2 daughters and a son. The 3 of them Bolka submitted would be able to keep an eye on Al and ensure he complied with the release conditions he expected the court might impose. He suggested a relatively high bail of $50,000, but Furist expressed concern about the ability of Al's kids to pledge the high bond and to supervise an accused killer outside of jail. Bolka asked for an adjournment to explore other avenues. There was a heavy media presence in the Whitby courthouse. For most reporters, it was their first glimpse of Al Smith because back in March, police had delayed announcing the arrest until after he made a first appearance in bail court. After that, Al was held at the Lindsay jail. Reporters converged on Barbara Brown and Rebecca. It's difficult, the soft-spoken Brown said. It's hard to say how I feel. It's confusing. Mainly, we're doing this for Beverly. The whole community wanted to know a name, she said. They needed to know a name. The hearing continued on April 21st. Bolka told the judge he had amended his release plan and was now proposing 2 sureties, one of Al's daughters and Mary Dumoulin, Al's sister. Mary testified that she had no contact with Al over the previous 25 years. Bolka asked, "Why are you here today?" Mary glanced toward Al. "Because he's my brother, and I love him," she said, "and he loves me." Nothing quite says sibling love like not being in contact for over 25 years. But yeah, let's go with that. Seems legit. Bolka suggested that the bail for Al could be raised even higher. The combined bond of $80,000 between different parties, he continued, would guarantee the sureties were diligent in ensuring that Al abide by any conditions imposed by the court. There is a great deal of money on the line for all concerned, Bolka said. He told the judge Al's criminal conviction was dated a decade old, and that Al himself was getting on in his years, living on a disability pension. Not surprisingly, the plan was rejected by Scott. The prosecutor argued that there was evidence that Al, a lifelong substance abuser, had been taking drugs, and he cautioned that Al's criminal past, in particular a conviction for failing to appear in court, indicated his disdain with which he regarded judicial orders. And Al reminded the judge of the heinous offense for which Al had been charged. This is an individual who has carried that for 34 years and managed to keep it concealed, he told the judge. There may be a plan here that might comply, but in my submission, this isn't it. Fierst reversed her decision, remanding Al to stay in the Lindsay jail. On April 28th, the basement courtroom in the Whitby courthouse was packed for the judge's ruling. She began with a review of the Crown's case, in particular the narrative provided by Linda, who the judge noted had been since charged with obstructing police. And she revisited the release plan put forth by the defense, noting the willingness of Al's family to help and calling the contribution relevant. There was no evidence Al had formed relationships that would likely lure him back to Alberta, the judge noted, and she added that while Al had been repeatedly interviewed about the murder by police, it didn't appear he'd ever taken steps to flee the jurisdiction. The judge also had reservations about the strength of the Crown's case. The evidence is not overwhelming, she said. She declared that Al would be released. He would live with his daughter, who resided in Coburg, under numerous conditions that included abiding by a curfew, reporting regularly to police, and abstaining from booze and drugs. The courtroom spectators sat in silence. Rebecca was confused and shocked. Wendy, one of Bev's sisters, leaned over to dab at a tear that ran down Barbara's cheek. The judge ordered Al to appear in an Oshawa remand court at the end of the month. She asked if he understood and intended to abide by the conditions. He said, "Yes, Your Honor." Court was adjourned. Al Smith looked out towards his supporters, beamed, then raised his handcuffed hands, giving a double thumbs up as he mouthed, "Yes!" in celebratory fashion. The police continued to talk to Linda, and things started to get inconsistent and weird. Linda once again changed her story. The next version, jealousy. "We came back for supper. We came into the house. He was to go over to Bev and Doug's to get some marijuana for Dave Maunder, so he went over. He was taking longer than he ought to, and I knew he was interested in Bev," Linda said. She told Lynch she prepared a bottle for her daughter, then crossed the street to see what was going on. "He was in the house with Bev. The doors weren't locked, so I went in through the back porch," Linda continued. "He was backing away from the table. She was writing out cards, I guess. I was just freaking inside. I thought, here he is trying to be with someone else again." There was a rifle in the doorway. Well, not in the doorway, but around the corner, beside the doorway. And I grabbed that, and I wanted to shoot him because I was so furious and enraged that he was trying to be unfaithful to me again. And I believe I shot Bev. Lynch asked, "You believe it? Or did you do it?" Linda, trying to get her bearings straight, finally admitted that she shot Beverly. She continued with her story. "I dropped the gun and went out of the house and back to Ashley's, and the phone was ringing, and it was Doug. I don't know what Al did. I didn't know about the money or where the pot was or anything. The next time I came back to the house, those doors were locked. I think I shot Bev. After I told Janet what happened, I said when we go back home, I went with Al, and I had my daughter with me, and we knocked on the door. Bev should have let us in because she locked the doors when Doug wasn't there. I believe that to be true, and that I was beside him when Al shot Bev, but I didn't have peace with that, Leon." Detective Lynch was not buying Linda's story. He told her she needed to tell the truth, and he had her start from the beginning. She told Lynch, "I didn't bring my daughter over with me because I didn't expect to be long. I went over to see what was keeping him. I came in through the back door. I don't know if he had asked Beverly about the pot or not. I don't think she had anything to do with the sale of the pot. Bev was sitting at the kitchen table, and he saw me, and he reached around the door frame and got the gun. It was very, very scary, Leon." Lynch asked what Beverly was doing. Linda answered, sitting at the table with her back to her and Al. Lynch then asked what Al was doing, and Linda replied that he shot Beverly. Linda went on to tell Lynch that she'd fled and went back to her house, where the phone was ringing. It was Doug Smith calling. She said it was as she spoke to Doug, she glanced out the window and saw Al putting the gun in the Humane Society van. Lynch asked Linda if she knew where the gun was now, and Linda said she didn't, but she speculated that it probably was behind the Humane Society on Thixon Road. So the police, along with Linda, went to the Humane Society, and despite a very exhausting search, actually many exhausting searches, no gun was found. Speaking of the murder weapon, there's something I forgot to mention that I should have added in part 1 of the series, but now seems to be as good as time of any to bring it up. In the spring after Beverly's murder, a 15-year-old kid who was fishing in the Port Perry Causeway discovered a Cooey rifle in the water. The Port Perry Causeway is located within a 22-mile radius of Raglan, where Beverly lived, and police believe the rifle was possibly the murder weapon. So why is this particular weapon interesting? Well, because law enforcement ruled out weapons before, such as one found at the Gulf gas station owned by Jeff Cicerick's father, one of the persons interviewed by police. But this Causeway rifle, it couldn't be ruled out. So let's keep that in mind, put that in your memory bank, because that's going to be relevant later. After Linda's arrest, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. But if you thought her changing stories of events were over, well, sadly not. She gave one more, this time saying she arrived to find Beverly's door locked and Al in the house with her. Beverly let her in. She told Al she wasn't sure where the marijuana was kept. This angered Al, who pulled out the gun and shot Beverly in the back of the head. Do you understand now why I find Linda to be so frustrating? Linda's changing narratives got her 2 criminal charges, to which she eventually pled guilty to. Unfortunately for the police, though, it would prove to be very problematic. Now, here's a possible reason why Linda started changing her story. When she started confessing to law enforcement, her kids stopped talking to her. Was this enough of a reason to give different accounts knowing they'd be unreliable? I mean, hey, maybe, perhaps. In late July of 2008, Al was ushered into a crowded courtroom packed with media and the families from both sides. He took a seat and stared out at the crowd as prosecutor Talina Mulligan addressed a justice of the peace. The Crown said she was withdrawing the charge of second-degree murder. There is no reasonable prospect of conviction, but the police investigation would continue. Those in attendance, they were stunned. Hours later, Al Smith walked out of the courthouse, flanked by his brother Joe, his sister Mary, and his lawyer Tom Bolka. Al had been instructed by Bolka what to say to reporters, and warned him not to deviate from the script. Which, in my opinion, is odd. Why does an innocent man need a script? I mean, I know defense lawyers want to cover their bases, but still. How would an innocent man incriminate himself by deviating from the script? Anyway, Al was ready to speak his lines. I did not murder Beverly Smith. This has been a terrible ordeal for myself and my family. End scene. No ad-libbing, any additional lines. His lawyer would take it from there, professing his client's innocence. Durham homicide boss J.J. Allen wouldn't comment much after the development, except to hint the story hadn't reached its conclusion. He said at this stage of the investigation, it's ongoing, and that it's an important case. Despite the outcome, police strongly believe they had identified the man who killed Beverly Smith. And the best way to secure a conviction going forward was to get a confession from Al Smith. This investigation, it was only getting started. Let's talk about how Al thanked his daughter and son-in-law with who he was living with. Al got into a fight with his son-in-law about the rules he had to abide by. Remember, before the charges were withdrawn, Al had to abide by conditions set by the court. Al felt that he was above the law and left the house, not caring if he violated the bail conditions to which he agreed to. The son-in-law called Ontario Provincial Police, and shortly after he was found walking along the highway. Nice to see Al cared enough about his daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren's well-being. Didn't matter to him if they put their house up for him. Didn't matter if they went homeless. But let's circle back to how Al behaved in court, which I am sure will boost his decent man status. He would shake his shackles in the family's direction. He lunged at Barb. At one time, mouthed to her that she was next. He blew kisses and winked at her. His antics got so out of hand that the judge had to remove him from the courtroom. Yep, just a decent man, shredded because that's how a decent and innocent man behave in court where he is accused of murder. Come on now. Also, after Al's bail, remember what Linda was told? If she was caught lying, she would get kicked out of the house. I mistakenly said it was Janet, but it was actually her surety. Outside the courtroom, Linda was sitting with this person. Barbara walked in and Linda shut her eyes real tight. And the surety asked her if she knew the lady. Linda said no. So this person went to Detective Lynch and asked if Linda knew who that lady was. And Lynch said yes, that it was Barbara, Beverly's sister. The surety then made Linda give back the key to the house. So I'm going to end it here. Next episode will cover an undercover sting operation police conducted called Operation Fearless. The mission? Extract a confession from Al Smith. Until next time.